G'day, everyone, and welcome along to the Toon Under podcast, the Southern Hemisphere's biggest and best Newcastle United podcast. Joining me tonight to run through what was a mixed bag of emotions, to say the least, against Luton is Jack. How's your day been?
Yeah, good. It was a mixed bag of emotions, that game. So I've had a busy day, so I haven't been stewing on it too much. But it's quite hard to. It's still quite hard to think about that game and what to think about it and what it means really. So we'll give it a bash anyway.
Yeah, it's not what you wanted at like 1, 2 o'clock in the morning our time over here. So it's been good to keep busy today. I've been off in the garden, a bit sunburnt today, so but needs doing. Sweated it all out and got my frustrations out in the garden. So let's kick on. So obviously we're going to run through the game itself. We're going to have a bit of a chat about some of the key talking points. Probably try and digest a little bit about what's going on at the club at the moment in terms of personnel, in terms of just general tactics, in terms of results and performances of late, and kind of kick on a little bit with what's happening on social media and in general in the crowd when it was 4-2 to Newcastle. So Newcastle managed to pull a 4-4 draw out of this game, despite being 2 goals down at one time, and despite being 1 goal up twice. So not exactly the greatest of defensive displays from either side, it's safe to say. At least this wasn't a 4-4 where everyone left at halftime like against Arsenal that time, but we didn't quite have the same feeling after that result as we did after this one. So look, I think we'll kick things off with the first few goals in the first half. So started off pretty lively. Lewis Miley, great crossfield ball. We're left in way too much space. The lad's got some quality, and in case you didn't know it, he is only 17. So we find him pinging a ball out to Kieran Trippier. Trippier gets on that and launches a ball into the box. Longstaff, first to pounce, brilliant finish, puts us 1 goal up. We had a little bit of a flurry forward, a little bit more. We maybe should have been a bit more clinical and got that second goal. But Luton equalised. I thought it was a potential soft free kick that Botman gave away just outside the box. They are notoriously good from set pieces. They're quite a tall side. They're quite a pacey side. And look, just generally, I also thought there was a push on Shah. I thought the actual there was like hands in the back, kept him down. Ball came across and it was put in the back of the net. 1-1. Look, Almiron puts Gordon through for the third goal. Gordon uses his pace, gets through on goal, cuts back in, as we see time and time again. Shot is saved, but it's parried out to Longstaff again, who follows up. Obviously, the keeper's probably done a little bit bad there to parry it out straight to a Newcastle player, but can't take anything away from Longstaff for that finish. And then just as we thought we may be getting a little bit more of a grip on the game, Luton sort of counterattack again. Barkley in midfield was terrorizing us pretty much the entire game. Certainly in the first half, he skipped past a couple of challenges, puts the ball in. It's this ball that comes through. It's kind of parried off Dubravka, falls straight to Barkley, who is in acres of space, no marking, pretty easy finish for him. So 2-2 at halftime. What did you make of the performance overall, Jack, for those opening goals?
I felt every time we scored a goal and went in front, I felt like we were going to just take control at that point, and we were going to, let our quality show at that stage and go more goals ahead. But it just didn't happen. Like the key moments were straight after we scored, where we should have just got a grip on the game then, and that's where I think we've missed control in midfield for a long time, and I think that happened again. So Miley and Longstaff do good stuff, and Bruno is Bruno, but we definitely miss something in the midfield without Joe Linton in there, and without Willock as well. So we end up just not, and the passing stats weren't good in the first half either. We're giving the ball away a lot. It's kind of when you want Bruno to step up and take control of the game, but he's not necessarily that kind of player as well. Especially when you're playing against a team counter-attacking, pacey counter-attack. So Luton were on a decent run of form. I think they'd only lost 1 in 8 before this game, and they gave Brighton an absolute slap the other day as well. Yeah. So they're not the pushovers that I think a lot of fans thought they would and should be, just because they're Luton Town. We still should have had enough on the pitch, even though we were missing 8 players again, because we're always missing almost an entire team of players at the moment. But yeah, it felt at half time like anything could happen, and I kept on thinking we're going to get control of it. We're gonna just start scoring more goals and win comfortably, but it never happened like that. And Luton through the whole game looked probably just as dangerous as we did to score more goals, including right at the end, which I'm sure we're going to get to.
Yeah, so we'll touch on some tactics, because I think it's worth having a little bit of a dive into why we think things are going a little bit pear-shaped and what we're missing in that midfield area, because I think that's a consensus that even with the personnel that we've got, we're feeling a little bit weird in that midfield area, a little bit soft touch at the moment. So we'll have a bit of a chat on that. Look, I think the big talking point for halftime was Gordon went off and Wilson came on. Now, I've seen since then, apparently it was a rolled ankle. So the moon boot that he was pictured with after the game was potentially just precautionary, but not what you wanted to see at halftime. Was Anthony Gordon going off, given how much he was crucial in some of our build-up play.
Yeah, and how good he's been all season. He was good against Villa. He was good in the first half. Yeah. I've been waiting for him to go down all season, because he's played so much football since the end of last season, because he had the Euros as well. So he's one player, and he's one player who last season he struggled for fitness when he signed. So he works so hard. There's been games that in this run where he's barely been able to move towards the end of the game. So I'm not surprised he's actually gone down at some point. And it's just the way things are happening. We'll talk about Harvey Barnes, but he's back and Gordon's out. And it's just the way things have gone this season. Yeah. Players are substituting in for each other and when they get injured. So Gordon, Wilson and Isak have done that about 8 times this season so far as well. So hopefully it's nothing too bad for Gordon, because he's been so important for us. And, he's been playing up front as well against Villa and here as well. So we need him. We've got no one else really fit unless Wilson's back and is fit, who can actually play up front.
Yeah, we may as well have a quick check on the squads. I didn't do this at the beginning. I was going to do it after we had a bit of a run through. But let's have a look at the squad that we started off with. Obviously, we just mentioned Gordon goes off, pretty much unchanged from the Aston Villa game. Otherwise, the big talking point, though, as you mentioned, Harvey Barnes back on the bench. Sight for sore eyes that, and then obviously Wilson's back injured just as Isak goes off for a little bit. Touch and go whether Isak's going to be playing. He's not going to miss as much as we first feared, I don't think. And then obviously Willock's just around the corner as well. So it is frustrating, as you said. We tend to see this where we get a player back from injury and then somebody else goes out. It's not surprising given the amount of games that the players are having to play because of all of these injuries. And maybe some of these are just a bit more precautionary, where we don't want to risk another long-term injury like Joe Linton or some of these other players. We still don't know what's happening with Anderson. It's like having a back transplant or something at the moment. But I still don't understand how he's managed to break his back getting out of bed, but we'll see how that goes. How much more confidence are you seeing with that when we start to see some of these big names back on the bench?
Yeah, it's a big boost when you see Wilson and Barnes on the bench. You've got something to come on and change a game when they're on there, instead of just having 10 fullbacks or 3 goalkeepers. So it's a big. You never know how fit Wilson actually is. Like, I don't think he trained before this game, so he looked fairly sharp when he came on. But And Barnes has been out for so long with it was a really strange under his toe injury or something like that, a really freak injury for somebody who rarely gets injured as well before. So it's just unlucky the way that happened. But I think Willock being back will be very, very important just because he's a body in midfield as well. So it just means we're not going to be flogging the same 3 central midfielders every game. But Willock came back earlier in the season, scored a goal against Man United, was looking good, and then he got injured again. So
back out,
who knows? Maybe this time they've just been very, very precautionary with him and they're making sure he's fully right. But the way things have been this season, Bruno will get injured or someone else will get injured, and we'll just swap in and out. And that's just the way it's been. Like the good news is we're not playing games every 3 days now, so we've got a bit longer before the next game. So,
well, that's really a good point. Actually, I think our next 3 games we're basically just playing on weekends now. It's a bit of a novelty for us as well. It means we can do preview pods as well as review pods.
I was looking at the fixtures. That's right. We've got weekend games and then we've got Blackburn in the Cup coming up, but not till the end of February. So, and we've said this before, but it's the time on the training ground as much as the fitness that's going to be good and to get a bit of confidence back. But it didn't look like. It certainly didn't look like they'd had that much time on the training ground at times in this game today.
No,
the midfield, and we'll talk about Dan Burn, but the midfield is a bit of an issue. And the big gaps that weren't there in the last few games were back for this game. And maybe it's because we're attacking more and we're at home. I don't know, but it was worrying to see that come back again after a couple of really good, solid away performances.
No, for sure, especially at home. We'll have a quick check on the Luton squad. Now, and I don't mean any disrespect to Luton at all here, but out of that team, apart from Ross Barkley, you're looking at that and they're not household names, shall we say, but it's a squad full of big, fit athletes. And I do feel that Luton at times play to their strengths. They really do, in terms of they bully people on the ball. They set everything up for set pieces because of the height that they have, and they set up for counter-attack football because of the pace that they have. I don't know if they have the quality in terms of in possession of the ball, on the ball itself, and passing everything, though they did look pretty sharp at that today as well. But they're just genuinely just a quick side. So makes sense for them to play on the counter-attack. Do you look at that squad, though, and you think, well, yeah, that's going to be a pretty hard game?
Well, I saw what they did against Brighton, and I saw what they did against us not that long ago. Like that, they might not be household names, but they're a good unit together, and they play the wing backs. And Doughty, I remember against us, was really good at left wing back in the first game. Barkley turns into Messi whenever he plays us anyway, so he ran the midfield. So when you get a team who's well coached and where everyone knows the job, when they're full of confidence, it's a dangerous proposition, and it doesn't matter if it's Luton Town. They're in the Premier League for a reason because they deserve to be there. They've done some what looks like sensible transfer business. One of their players scored a hat-trick just a few days ago. So you can sneer at them for being Luton, or our fans can and think, oh, we should beat Luton, but that's just not how football works. And there's been people today on social media saying it's embarrassing and we should always beat Luton. That's just not the way it goes. You have to earn the right to get goals and to keep goals out and to win games, and we didn't do that. And we didn't do that enough today in this game. We definitely didn't do it in the first game against them as well. So that should have been a warning sign for us. And similar. It was a different game, but it was that it still wasn't a win for us. So Luton are unbeaten against us this season. Fair play to them. Well done.
Yeah. No, they are very good at what they do. They know what their strengths are. They know what their weaknesses are. And they're actually, as you said, exceptionally well coached, and they know exactly what they need to be doing. So, I mean, since they beat us at their place, they've actually had some good form. So it's not a given. We keep saying the Premier League's the best league in the world, and it is for a reason that these sorts of teams can still give good accounts of themselves, and we've seen that today, where we were probably lucky to get away with a point, really.
And what I would say as well, though, is that if we had more of a full squad, we would win, because we've got a lot more quality than them, and we're at home. So in normal circumstances, we should be winning games like this, and even in difficult circumstances, which it still is difficult circumstances because the whole season since December has been difficult. Even then, we still could have won, or on it with a bit more calmness and a bit not just totally losing the plot at certain points in this game, we would have won.
Yeah, so let's head on to the second half, and probably one of the biggest talking points I think of the second half, if not the entire game, was probably Luton's third goal to open scoring for the second half. Dan Burn has come in for a good deal of criticism, and we'll probably have a deep dive into this after we get through the actual game stuff. But we saw against Aston Villa where Diaby didn't really do much in the first half, but then as soon as who was the Villa, Bailey came on, he just tore Dan Burn apart. Pure pace. And I think you said on the chat today, Dan Burn is Dan Burn. He's not going to suddenly develop like lightning pace overnight. So it is that sort of weird thing where he's getting criticized for not being able to do something that he's never going to be able to do. But he again got done for pace pretty much throughout this game. I am very surprised, and we will definitely talk about Howe's selection and lack of substitutions, I think, a little bit later. But look, he fouls the player on the outside of the box, carries on into the penalty area. I think everyone just assumed it was going to be a foul, a free kick, possibly a yellow card, free kick outside of the box, but went to VAR, went through, penalty is called, despite a false start where the striker decided he was going to take it a little bit too early and the ref was having none of it, puts it in exactly the same place, and Dubravka makes exactly the same move. So same result anyway for the goal for Luton. But the one thing that I think a lot of fans were quite irate about was the fact that the initial foul happens outside the box. And you're thinking, well, surely you can't just pick and choose what area of the pitch you decide to award the free kick in. If there are multiple free kicks, it has to be the first incident, surely. You've actually mentioned, I think, that it is actually in the rules. Run us through what we're all missing.
It is in the rules. So I can't remember the exact wording, but I remember this was changed a couple of years ago, where it's if the foul starts outside the box but then continues into the box, then it's a penalty. And I remember when that changed at the time, everyone was pleased about that because it's a big advantage for it's a much bigger disadvantage, obviously, conceding a penalty than it is a free kick outside the box. And usually, if you're fouling someone in that situation, they're usually in on goal, or they can have a shot, or they can lay it off or something. So I just think it's your punishment for getting wrong side in such a bad way. And like you said, Dan Burn was beaten for pace so many times in this game, he's never ever going to be able to improve his pace. In fact, it's going to get worse as he gets older. He's 31, 32 now. So I would question why he kept on being left 1-to-1 with a winger who was much quicker than him. So I've got no problem with this penalty being awarded, and I think we'd be screaming for it if it was the other way around. I thought Dubravka could maybe have been a bit smarter and gone the same way that he had gone before, because Carlton Morris is like a journeyman forward. I don't think he's got that much finesse about him, so I'm not surprised he put it in exactly the same spot. I actually thought it was a replay of the first penalty when I saw it, because it
pretty much was anyway,
the same way.
Yeah.
So I was just disappointed at the outcome there. But I talked before about the points in the first half where we lost control. This was like complete head loss. This was like what happened against Portsmouth when Allardyce was there, when we were 4-0 down after like 5 minutes or something stupid. We just totally lost the plot at this point, and you shouldn't do this when you've got so many experienced senior players on the pitch. At this point is when you want to slow things down, get your head, do it, play it calm for 5 minutes. Don't let what happened happen, because then you leave yourself a mountain to climb. But that's what we did.
I think pretty much as soon as that penalty was scored, it was all Luton for a good 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes. And probably could have and should have scored more against us in that period of time. But you look, Adebayo made it 4-2 to Luton. It was again Ross Barkley pinpoint pass. He was, but again, it's like, and I want to ask you this after, as we start to discuss tactics and Eddie Howe's substitutions and personnel changes and what have you. But Barkley was in acres of space in between that midfield and the defense that we've seen time and time again this season. And it's like something has to be done about that, I think, because it is causing us some major issues. It was just far too easy.
Yeah. Well, it's happened a lot since December, and De Bruyne, it was very noticeable when De Bruyne came on a couple of weeks ago. Barkley was doing this the whole game, though. He was playing in that space in between, and that's where, if you had a defensive midfielder, that's where they'd be sitting to snuff that out. Bruno against Fulham and Villa has been much more disciplined in that defensive position, and those gaps haven't been there, whether that's because that's an away game. At home, we're trying to push forward, especially after we've just conceded. Maybe that's something to do with it. But this goal was almost identical to the AC Milan goal that they scored to make it 2-1. Like, I've seen a screenshot where it's basically exactly the same. The players are all in the same position. And then, like, it's Dan Burns' side again, but there's something structurally going wrong for teams to be getting that much space in the midfield and then creating the same chance again. You know, like, there's something going wrong somewhere, and you can't pin it all on one player, although it was all on his side and he had a very bad game. He's maybe not getting the protection from in front that he should be, and from the midfield, who was told before about Miley and Longstaff, good at doing certain things. Miley's 17, though. He's 17. He's going to take time to get used to playing in this way. Bruno's not a natural sort of strong defensive sitting midfielder. He likes to get forward a bit more. So there needs to be a solution to this. And there has been in the last 2 away games, but today it was just all to pot again.
Yeah. Now, as bad as that spell of game time was, and how much Luton actually dominated that at that time, and how poor Newcastle were, I will at least hold my hands up and say I'm actually really impressed the fact that their heads didn't drop. They still kept in the game. They still kept pushing. They had plenty of the ball in the rest of the game, so there was no reason to think that they couldn't at least score another goal, and then who knows what's happening. And Bruno pulls out probably one of the assists of the season. Gorgeous outside of his football, straight through. Trippier with an absolute gorgeous finish. Pulls it back to 3-4, and it's pretty much game on there, and it was pretty much all Newcastle for a good portion of the game again. Luton sat back. I think they kind of thought that it was done and dusted. Newcastle had other concerns, and then obviously the super sub back in the game, Harvey Barnes comes in, scores the equalizing goal. I will say I thought Lewis Miley had an absolutely fantastic game for us this time. He actually won the ball back in midfield, passed it off to Barnes, and Barnes literally was never going to miss from there. Clinical as we always expect, as we wanted, as we had hoped we'd see more often this season. But it's good to have him back after 4 months out, and let's hope he stays fit, because he could really sort of help push us on for the rest of the season. 4-4. Look, I think we probably had more chances. I think Luton probably had more chances. There was plenty. I mean, where they got 11 minutes of injury time from, I'm not quite 100% sure. But look, being 2 goals down, I think we would all probably taken a draw at about the sort of 60th minute mark when Luton goes up. So are you happy with the fight, the comeback, the fight that the players have shown, even if there were some issues earlier on in the game?
Yeah, of course. It was impressive to come to score 2 goals so quickly, but it's kind of tinged with disappointment that firstly we've put ourselves in that position, because like I said before, that was a complete head loss after they scored their penalty and then the next goal. And then it was disappointing that when we got to 4-4, there was still, including injury time, almost half an hour left of the game. And we couldn't we couldn't get the 5th goal, which would have just rounded off one of the best games that, for a neutral that I can remember seeing. But if we'd have scored the 5th, that would have just rounded it off. But actually, the last 5 minutes of injury time was probably more Luton anyway. Like, they had another really good chance at the back stick, which Dubravka made quite a good save from. So in the end, like, a draw was a fair result, but it would have been a really memorable one if we'd managed to get the win. But yeah, it is sort of, you do feel like it was a loss in a way, I think, just because of how it is, mainly because of that spell where the 3 minutes where they scored their 2 goals, and just the fact that we were a constant threat in the whole game, and we never ever had any kind of control in the game. And that's what the good teams do when they're at home. They have control. They will control large parts of the game. And it was a bit like Eddie's first game against Brentford, which was 3-3, where it was just sort of end-to-end basketball, complete chaos. And that must be not a good game for a manager to manage, because they must just feel powerless. Like, what can they do? Like, they can't really control anything about it. Everything's just going crazy, and just the way that this game was, that's just what happened. So a draw is a fair result in the end, but it doesn't really help us a great deal with what we want to do, because we wanted to back up the Villa win, but it is what it is.
Yeah. So on that note, we basically said, I would have taken 4 points from the Villa and Luton games. So in terms of the points tally, we're pretty much what we wanted, what we would have seen as a good result. But I think it's so disappointing after putting in that away performance against Aston Villa, who we pretty much all thought we were going to get beat off. And then to follow it up at home, where we typically have been so strong, against a Luton side who, look, they've played well, but we've played bigger and better sides than them at home this season, and been so much more controlled in what we've done. So look, it's end to end, as you said, perfect game for the neutral. Not so much as a fan of either of these sides at the moment. On the referee front, I thought he left a lot go. I think he let a lot go in the game, which probably benefited Luton more than us at the moment, given that we are probably feeling a little bit lightweight. My big criticism of Longstaff in this game, and probably a fair few others, is he's very weak in a 50-50, and does tend to kind of like fall over and look for free kicks that just aren't there. But you have to think that if the referee had reffed that as he did, and we'd had Joe Linton in that midfield, it would have been a completely different kettle of fish, sort of with his presence and his bullying tactics in that midfield area. But sadly, not to be. Let's have a quick check on some of the match stats. We actually had more possession for probably the first game I can remember in a long time that we've actually won possession in, 54% to 45% for possession. Shots on target, 6 to 8. Newcastle, six shots on target, 19 shots in total. I think we need to get better at getting shots on target. If we're doing 19 shots to 11 in a game and actually not having as many shots on target. As you'd expect with that possession, we've got more touches. We've had more passes. We've had more tackles. We've won the ball back. I thought Luton were very sloppy in possession at certain times in this game, and we won it back by our pressing, and we did quite well on that. 8 corners to 2, and Luton scored from one of those, and ours were pretty poor. The last few games, we've actually started looking quite convincing from set pieces and corners, and we're pretty much back to square one in this game, which you'd kind of expect a little bit because of the way that Luton are, and the fact that they are a tall timber side. So I mean, those stats pretty much stack up as terms of a draw, I would say. Would you?
Yeah, in terms of a draw, maybe not a 4-4, because
not 4-4.
Like, how many? There was 14 shots on target, and 8 of them ended up being goals. So yeah, like, and the XG, because I'm an XG wanker, that was about almost 3 each as well. So it was kind of like a high scoring game. There was not that many shots on target, but the ones that were good chances. So. But in the first half, I think Luton had actually more shots than us, so we came back into it more in the second half. It was just that spell. after the penalty and between their third and fourth goals where everything just went crazy. But it's hard to look at stats for a game like this because there was it wasn't a normal football game. I don't think that there just wasn't any control really from either side. It was just sort of it was just quite random. Like anything could have happened, but that's not a good thing from a Newcastle perspective because we want to be able to control things and we don't want things to be random, especially at St James's Park. So, and that's what I listened to a couple of other sort of national podcasts, and they're always talking about the control that clubs like Man City have, and that Arsenal have now got more control in games. Liverpool have been a bit more chaotic, like their brand of football. And we, even when we were good last season, we didn't necessarily, apart from when we were totally blowing teams away, like when we were winning 5-0 and scoring 5 goals in 20 minutes against Spurs, and all those away games as well where we scored 4 goals. Like it wasn't sort of consistent control as such. It was like flurries of pressing and scoring goals, and it was really exciting. But I think we're probably going to have to adapt and evolve if we want to be a consistent Champions League team where we do control games more and we're more, we've got more actual say over what happens in games instead of relying on sort of winning random chaotic matches like this.
Yeah, I'd be interested. The one stat that I would like to have seen for this, which isn't on this that I pulled up, would be pass completion percentage. I saw
we were low, yeah.
We were low, and I'm pretty sure I saw a stat, and I'm not picking on Longstaff, I swear, but I think he was about 70-something%, and Ross Barkley was like high 80s, and I think that sums it up.
Was that
and we were just like wasteful in possession again, and I think that's been like a real sort of hallmark of this season for us. Whether or not it is just fatigue, mental tiredness, we don't know, but something definitely needs to change with that, I would say.
It's interesting as well. It's interesting just with Longstaff for 1 minute. How often does a player score 2 good goals in 15 first half minutes, and then it's not really it's widely regarded as having a bad game? And I think that just shows you that the problems we're having in the midfield. Longstaff was really good for us last season, and he scored 4 league goals this season now, so he's scoring more goals now. But I think just because of the balance of the midfield isn't the same anymore. I think he's maybe suffering from that, and he's not performing as well as he did last season. But saying that though, he has started adding more goals. He scored at Fulham as well, so he's got 3 goals in his last 3 games now. So
he strikes me as a player that is very much a system-based player. He's very good when he knows his job and everyone around him is doing theirs. When you've got someone like Miley who is still learning the game and is maybe not going to be quite in the right position at the right time, when you don't have someone like a Joe Linton there to do the grind work in midfield for you, when you don't have someone like Joe Willock who can do the legwork and run really fast and do that box-to-box link-up play quite nicely. I think he's kind of suffering from those players not being around him, and he doesn't have enough to his game at the moment to kind of fill in those blanks maybe. He's very good at what he does, but when he's doing it well, but he's not got a lot else to his game. And I think we probably saw that under Bruce, to be honest, where Bruce kind of was very much a just go out there and have a go, lads kind of manager, rather than sitting there with the players and letting them know exactly where they needed to be and what jobs they were meant to be doing. I think Longstaff has thrived under Eddie Howe with that leadership and guidance, but we've seen that he isn't really that all-round player who can just do his own thing. So all this chopping and changing maybe is affecting him a little bit like that. And we've got to remember he hasn't been back from injury for very long either.
Yeah, and don't forget as well, we signed Sandro Tonali, Champions League finalist, AC Milan future captain, to address this midfield problem about not having as much control of games. And then what happened with him was just a completely one-off, unprecedented problem. So next season he will be like a new signing, like the cliche. But we saw from him in the first game against Villa how good he is, how good he can be, and even other games he was working his way and he was feeling his way into the team. But I think that's why we signed him, was to try and get a bit more of that controlling games. And Longstaff would maybe not be and Miley definitely wouldn't be playing as many games as they are if we had Toon Army. So it'll be good for the team when we get him back next season. But yeah, we've still got 15 league games to go to see where we can what we can do, and also the FA Cup to go as well. So we can't just fast forward to the end of this season, even though it feels sometimes like it'd be good to do that with the injury situation.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are kind of just sack this season off. We've done with it now. There's way too much issues going on. So the league table, apologies that's a little bit on the small side for those watching on YouTube. But look, we're down in 9th. We probably go down to 10th. 10th if Chelsea win. But we're still a couple of games in a row and a nice run of fixtures. Getting back up into contention for that top 6 again. So it's not like the season's over. We just need to kind of put things right and quickly.
I was thinking as well about the league. So after the Villa game, everyone got excited and it's like, oh, we've got we're only a few points off 6th. It doesn't really matter for us this season if we're not going to finish 6th. It doesn't really matter where we finish between 7th and say 12th. Really, like unless 7th gets the Conference League place if we want that. But the FA Cup, actually, we've got Blackburn and then we've got 2 more games to reach a final, and then that's probably going to be that might be the best way into the Europa League this season anyway. So it doesn't matter this season really. If we're not going to finish in a European space, it doesn't really matter where we do finish. I think it's all about preparing and getting ready for next season. So in a way, like, there'll be less pressure on games potentially in future games this season if we are a bit further off. But it'd still be good to put a run together and get some players back, and we've got more training time, like I said before, fit players coming back. We're more than capable of putting a run together, but we need to fix some of the things that significantly have been wrong against the weaker teams over the last 6 or 7 weeks to be able to start looking at putting a run together.
Yeah, so that was one of the things I wanted to touch on now. Is how have we gone? And I'm going to put this up. And again, this is something that someone shared. I can't remember who shared it on our group chat today. Off the BBC Sport. Newcastle's defensive record since Christmas is absolutely diabolical. We're like sort of lowest percentile in pretty much every stat. 19th worst. We're 19th in goals conceded. We're 20th in shots on target. We're 20th in shots faced. We're 20th in expected goals against. We've been very, very poor defensively. What I'd like to get your opinion on is how have we gone from the best defense in the league to pretty much the worst at the moment?
Well, that's the $64 million question, isn't it? I really don't know. I mean, in fairness, that run has included Liverpool, Man City, Villa, who we did really well against, but it's also included Forest and Luton as well. So, yeah, we've conceded 15 goals in that time. So the last 3 home games, we've conceded 10 goals. So last season, we weren't even creating chances, never mind goals. It was impossible for anyone to score against us for a period of time. So it is a bit of a head scratcher because it's the same back 4 apart from Nick Pope, obviously, because Dubravka's there instead. But the 4 defenders are the same. Bruno and Longstaff are still in there. Miley's in there, but you're not going to blame him for a complete collapse of solidity, defensive solidity. So I think we've lost the plot a bit since Christmas, really, or since this run we've been on. Like, it's really hard to pinpoint what exactly it is. We've already talked though about the gap between the midfield and the defense, and that could be a consequence of Pope not doing the sweeper keeper role, so the defenders are further back. It could be a consequence of Bruno trying to get forward a bit more, or trying to.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that
because he's got less experienced Miley next to him, and Longstaff, who's not as technically good, and because he's missing Joe Linton maybe. So it could be that. It could be that players we're not pressing as a whole team the same way we used to, because players are not as fit as they were. Joe Linton and Willock were really strong on the left-hand side last season. We haven't got that this season, which is meaning that the left back is more exposed. There's a lot of things it could be. We're still scoring plenty of goals. We've scored 17 goals in that time that we've conceded 15. So, like it's exciting and it's entertaining from a goal scoring perspective. And that was a concern last season. We weren't scoring enough goals, so we've just sort of flipped it on its head. But I definitely don't think Eddie Howe is going to be happy about this, though, because managers want. I keep talking about control, but managers want to feel like they have an impact and a say in what's going on, and I don't think he does at the moment, which is not really a good sign when you've got games coming up and the scrutiny that goes with being the Newcastle manager as well.
Yeah, it's clearly not just down to, we've got injuries and we've had chops and changes. Yes, I think you've nailed it with the Dubravka in for Pope, and the lack of that sweeper keeper role, I think, has definitely taken some getting used to in that time. And, it probably has created that little bit more of a gap. But I also do wonder whether or not Bruno's wanted a little bit more of a forward facing role, I guess you would say, rather than that defensive holding role that he maybe did very well last season as a more of a box-to-box player. He seems to have been more trying to push forward more this season. And, maybe we just don't have that player who's slotting in instead of him at the moment. Do you think that there's any benefit or any questions over Howe's lack of changing formation and tactics to do with this, in terms of if this is and we've identified it a few times now in a few games where we're getting this gap in midfield and players are starting to take advantage of that and create really, really good chances, if not goals, from that space that they're afforded in that midfield gap between the defense and the midfield. I know we're strapped for players, but surely as a manager, that's pretty easy to see. If we can see it, Eddie Howe is Eddie Howe, and I'm still fully behind him. But at the moment, you're kind of wondering why we're not trying to sort of address that issue.
Well, we sort of did in the last two away games. So he had put his finger on something that was going wrong, and I don't know, because I don't know about tactics. Like, I don't understand what I'm watching. There's all these nuances and things going on that football managers understand that fans don't understand. So, and I'm not going to pretend to know what it is. But in terms of changing the formation or changing the system, that's difficult because, like I said, they haven't had a lot of time on the training pitch. He's had different players coming in and coming out throughout this period. So there's a lot of intangibles in football: confidence, form. The players are a year older, and some of that, in fact, 3 members of that back four are well over 30 now as well. So that's probably playing into it a bit as well. I think it's the system is working in an attacking sense. It's just that Rafa always used to talk about the blanket. So if you pull the blanket up too much, your feet got cold, and if you pulled it down too much, your head got cold in the top part of your body. So the blanket's gone too far the other way, where we're attacking a lot and scoring goals, but we're just shipping goals as well.
Yeah.
And it's, I think Eddie Howe is an amazing coach, a great manager, perfect fit for the club, and it's just a huge learning curve for him this season. But it is concerning that the same thing has happened in 2 home games against Forest and Luton, and I want to know what he's going to do about that, because we've got Bournemouth coming up, which will be a good test of this as well at home. Because there's, like you said, you can see, if we can see that Dan Burns getting rinsed at left back, he can surely see that. And I know that you've got something to pull up about that. So I don't know when you want to.
I want to finish. I want to finish on that actually. So I'm going to pop this thing. I'll read it for the people listening on audio, but this is from Newcastle World, and apparently there was an interview where, and it says, he asked about Dan Burn. Howe said, Dan, for me, has been absolutely outstanding since arriving at the football club, and he'll play a huge part in a brilliant season last year with an excellent defensive record. I thought he was magnificent at Aston Villa and a big part of why we played so well. Tino is an outstanding player and will no doubt have a huge bearing on our future. Why didn't Howe bring Livramento on earlier? And this is the quote: when you're in my shoes, you have more than one thing to focus on, so it's never that clear cut. Luton are a really big team. We knew set plays would be a huge threat, so we had to cover that as well. It's not just one discipline. We conceded the first goal from a set play. Now, we talked earlier about this, that first snippet about him being great last season. That is slightly worrying, because a lot of the criticism that we see on social media about Eddie Howe is he has his favorites, and why is Tino not playing? What has he got to do when he's played so well when he has played? Dan Burn is getting done for pace and blah, 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 blah. Now, that does not make good reading for anybody who is trying to back Eddie Howe. That's his mindset, and I'm pretty sure you'd probably agree with that. The other thing for me, though, is he's saying that he's very conscious of Luton and the height and the set plays, so he wanted the extra height in defense for that. Now, again, this sort of then comes back to that, well, do we need to change up formations rather than having that sort of, we should be working on other things, maybe try like moving Livramento to cover Dan Burn more in terms of that defensive workload, so you can keep the height but still have Livramento going forward. Again, we're not managers. I'm not going to tell Eddie how to do his job, but there comes a point where some of the criticism that's being leveled at him probably does need addressing, because it is starting to make a little bit more sense in terms of, well, why is this not happening? Why are we not seeing Tino Livramento? And that's without going into the Lewis Hall fiasco with why he's even at the club if we're not going to play him. What do you make of those quotes from Eddie Howe, and where do you see this needing to go?
Yeah, there's a bit to unpack here. So first of all, Dan Burn's a scapegoat. So he is a social media scapegoat, the same way that Longstaff is, and the same way that Miggy is. So he's always, but players are scapegoated for a reason. Usually, there's some aspect of what they do which makes them a scapegoat. So I don't think what he said about last season has any relevance whatsoever, and I do think that that's a bit of a concerning quote, because like last season is last season now. So and yes, Dan Burn has credit in the bank for the way he played last season, where he was really good. Just the way, in the similar way that Eddie does for his management, but you can't pick a team in February of 2024 based on performances, up to April of 2023, really. Like that's not really a recipe for success. So I'm a bit concerned about that. I think his point about the Villa game is very fair, because he was really good at Aston Villa, and he was really good at Fulham as well, and he scored a goal at Fulham. So I think that's fair enough to point that out. He says that you've got more than one thing to focus on, and it's never that clear cut. That's what I was kind of saying. But it seems a bit like he has sacrificed. He's played him at left back against this really quick counter-attacking winger, knowing that he's going to give chances up. But the trade-off for that for him is that we're going to be better at defending set pieces. But if that's the kind of calculation, I don't think that that's a calculation that I would go with, because it affects the whole game when you're seeing your team constantly under pressure, and when you're seeing a team target one side, it really affects the whole flow of the match, because you feel nervous every time they get forward and go onto that side. So I've got no doubt that he's had a lot going on in his mind about what to do, and he does have loyalty towards Dan Burn, and fair enough, that's fine to an extent. And I'm not going to scapegoat Dan Burn, but I was slightly surprised he started this game. I thought it would be tailor-made for Tino. And the other kind of slightly worrying thing about this is the Luton game is not that long ago, where we said exactly the same thing. He played Burn because of his height. We said the same thing against Forest. He played Dan Burn because of his height. Against Chris Wood scored a hat-trick. So I just think, yeah, it's not great to see Tino Livramento not playing when he's never put a foot wrong as well. And it kind of, it's a lack of trust in him. And you touched on Lewis Hall as well, which is a very, very strange situation.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised to see Burns start against Forest. I hope he doesn't. But if he does, I wouldn't be surprised to see him play really well and be part of a win. So, like it's hard to, it's not as simple as drop down Burn and play Tino and everything's going to be fine. Like that's not the way. And that's the current narrative on social media. And the main takeaway from this game is that Dan Burn's shit. And if Tino played, we would have won. Like it's not that simple. But there's definitely questions for him to answer about this and to address, so this doesn't become more and more of a problem in the future games this season.
Well, I think it's because it's in your face because of the penalty. Let's be honest. If that penalty wasn't awarded and Dan Burn had kind of, got done a couple of times, but nothing came of it, nobody would be stressing about it. It was literally because it's been highlighted because of the penalty. But there's no guarantee with the pace that some of those players in the Luton squad have that Livramento would not be, caught the wrong side either. It's also not just a Dan Burn issue in that if the midfield are not controlling the ball and they're not holding onto the ball, Luton break more often, just as like Dan Burn's trying to like move forward or something. And he has been trying to kind of bomb forward more to support in a more left back role as opposed to just that flat back three with Trippier bombing forward that we all looked at last season, and that was kind of how they managed, and that was why Dan Burn worked. But I think as a manager, I sometimes wonder if managers kind of see some quotes, see some feelings from fans, and actively don't want to say, oh, we'll do that because we don't want them to constantly be thinking that they can dictate what we should or shouldn't be doing. But, maybe I'm reading way too much into that. But at the end of the day, look, Dan Burn for me is a good player. I think he's very good in the squad. Every player has their mistakes. Every player has their bad games. But overall, I don't think he's put that much wrong this season. But I'm with you in terms of there's no way that he should have been playing this game. No, and like you go about set pieces. If you don't have the team bombing forward as much as they do, then they're not going to be winning a lot of free kicks and a lot of corners. So you don't have that set piece threat. If you stop that cross coming through, then you don't need somebody to be. And then, like Dan Burn's not going to be any good for a cross coming into the box if he's out on playing left back. So there's those little arguments sort of as well. And I do understand the frustration with a lot of the fans why Tino's not playing, because he's been fantastic every time he's stepped on that pitch for us, and it can get frustrating.
It's interesting what you said though about there's no guarantee that we wouldn't concede goals if Tino was playing. We nearly did in the 97th minute from his side. Like there was a really good chance at the back post that Dubravka saved. So there's that. I don't think Eddie looks at social media. He's not the kind of manager. He just picks a team. I think some managers would do that. I think some managers we've had previously would do that. Sam Allardyce, people like that, I think would do it to try and prove a point. But Eddie's not that kind of manager. I think it's because of the system that we play it's been so reliant on Burn dropping into that third centre back position and Trippier pushing forward so much as well. Trippier scored a goal and got an assist today. We scored 4 goals. We're still, I think we're like joint third highest goal scorers in the league. So there's still a lot to be positive about in terms of, we're free flowing, scoring loads of goals, even though we've only got one fit striker at a time. So there's a lot of positives in that sense. And it's good to watch entertaining football matches. It's just, we're at a point now where, like if this was last season, it would be a bit more easier to take. I think it's because we're at a point where we should be better. We should be more able to win games like this comfortably. And that's not, we've already talked about how well Luton played and how we have to respect Luton. But at this stage in our development, with the players we've got, you would hope that we'd be able to control and win games like this without such a crazy sort of football match. But yeah,
And
I
look,
think
fans are a bit frustrated at the moment as well, purely and
yeah,
simply because we didn't do any business in the January window when, you know, we've got so many players out injured. You know, there is frustration creeping in there. It's like, well, we should be building on last season, not going backwards. But, you know, there's so many factors at play. I think next season is the defining season. I don't think it makes sense to put pressure on Eddie Howe or the players at the moment. And one thing that does annoy me is criticize players, yes. I think. I mean, I've said tonight. I think Longstaff was poor in places. I think he needs to be a little bit tougher on the ball. Stop going down for free, for like looking for easy free kicks. You know, there's passing issues. You know, yes, Dan Burn was done for pace in this game. I have no problem with people criticizing them, but temper it to constructive criticism. Don't start abusing players, because like it or not, these are the players that have to see out this season for us, because we can't replace them with anyone at the moment. So getting on their back and harping on about these players on social media and getting on their back and tagging the owners in and all this sort of stuff that I keep seeing, it's not going to help the cause. It's not going to help the situation. And it's certainly not going to change anything, because we don't have a window open at the moment, and we don't have any money, even if there was, to actually go out and buy anyone to replace these players. Yeah. So, you know,
the squad, like the squad is the squad at the moment, and we're only 4 transfer windows into the new owners as well, and we've got the FFP problems that we've talked about. And if we're still having similar conversations to this, let's say in October next season, where we've had another transfer window, we've got more players, where Eddie Howe's had this whole bruising but very valuable season under his belt, so he'll have learned a lot from this season. And if we're still seeing the same issues, if Dan Burns playing left back and we're conceding 7 goals in 2 games to Forest and Luton or whoever it might be next season, then it's going to be a real cause for concern. And when we've got, when we're not missing a minimum of 8 first team players for every game as well, because that's, as boring as it is, that has been the story of the sort of the season since December, the injury situation, because it affects everything. So even though it felt like today, like, oh, we don't have any injuries anymore because we've got Barnes and Wilson on the bench. Yeah, but Joe Linton and Isak and Willock, Isak gone down and stuff. So
and Gordon's gone off at half time.
So so it's like, it's just a constant, and the season is just like a bruising, really difficult experience. So like I said before, if the pressure's off a bit for top 6, if we can play with a bit of freedom, and if we can get through the FA Cup tie, we'll see what happens. We'll be able to salvage maybe a good end to the season to go with. There's been a lot of good moments this season as well. There's been a lot of exciting games, but it's just been a very bruising, battering experience in a lot of ways. But everyone will be stronger for the experience next season as well. You can tell I'm already thinking about next season.
Yeah,
should stop.
I think a lot of us are. I think this season, just get it over with now. But it's always worth bearing in mind what's happened to West Ham as well. Like West Ham last season, I lost count of how many times Moyes was supposedly under pressure because they weren't doing very well in the league. They go on, they win the Europa League or whatever cup that they were in Europe, and now they're up in top 6 contention again this season after selling Declan Rice, potentially one of their best players. They've done really, really well. And David Moyes did this all the time with Everton as well, if you remember, where he would have one absolutely fantastic season and then they would struggle the next season, and then he'd come back and he'd change things around and they'd change personnel. But a lot of that always came into not having the big enough squads, not having the experience to deal with that European campaign and the league at the same time. And I think we're seeing that this season. It's a learning curve for Eddie Howe. It's his first time where he's had European football. Let's not get the doom and gloom out just yet for this squad, for this manager, and for this club, because I think the season hasn't been a complete failure. As you said, I think we've had plenty of good moments in it. And next season, another transfer window with new sponsors and new financial wiggle room, so to speak, a little bit more spending power. Who knows what next season is going to be? Let's sort of let's wait and see what happens. And I think that's probably a good place to leave it. So thanks for joining us tonight, Jack. It's been a little bit of a nice process going through that game, even though the result wasn't necessarily what we wanted.
Perfect. Cheers. Thanks very much.
Excellent. Thanks a lot. See you later.